workshop is about getting started. We offer several writing workshops. This one is kind of specific about what you're going to do once you have your assignment before you write anything down. You're just kind of looking at a blank sheet of paper and you're saying, how do I start this assignment? Some people might think getting started is going to have to do with writing your first sentence or writing your first paragraph. We have other writing workshops that will address different things. We have one later in the semester for getting organized, introductions and conclusions, revising, and editing. Today we're going to be working on getting started just when you've gotten your assignment and you're just done nothing. So I think it's important for everybody to understand where we're addressing getting started, because it could mean several things. It seems simple, but the first thing you want to do is that you make sure that you're understanding what your assignment is. It seems obvious, but I've had students, I had a student today who didn't quite understand. We call them the guidelines. When you get an assignment from your instructor, you usually get a piece of paper that says, I need you to do this informative paper on this topic or a topic of your choice. It's going to be 3 pages. Those are your guidelines. Nobody just says in a classroom, write a paper, right? You always have to be told, well, what are my guidelines? Another word for guidelines is purpose. What am I trying to accomplish in this paper? Why am I doing this? So we're going to focus in on the guidelines and the purpose of the paper. This is just when you get the assignment. You haven't written anything down yet. You're just going to understand what you're supposed to do. Then later in the workshop, we're going to look at free-writing strategies when we're starting to get something on paper. If you have a topic and you know you have to write it into, say, an informative paper, do you think about what's going to be going into your paper before you start writing, say, page 1? Is there something you do? Okay. So when you get your assignment, you're going to want to figure out the guidelines. It might say this needs to be a descriptive paper. How can I describe my topic becomes a question that you're going to ask yourself. How can I compare and contrast my subject? Has anybody had a compare and contrast paper? It gets a little bit tricky because they might be asking you to read 2 separate articles and then show what is similar and what is different. Well, if you have to show the similarities and differences, you want to be aware that that's the purpose. You don't want to mistakenly just focus on one thing and write about that. So you have to be aware of what they're trying to ask you to do. Sometimes you'll be asked to analyze an article, something you read. You can analyze a movie. So when it's analyzed, it's not summarized. So you have to be careful. To inform. Sometimes you'll get an assignment that just says, I need to have a research paper done. A research paper really has the purpose of informing. You're not supposed to give your opinion. It's not about how you see it. It's not about being descriptive. It's not about comparing the topic to something else. You just need to give solid information. Or you might be asked to persuade your audience. The assignment guidelines might say, persuade your classmates to vote in the upcoming election. What would you say to them? Okay? This is a sample assignment. This is something that you might find. It might say, write a 2-page essay persuading the Board of Education to make a change that would improve your life as a student at College of DuPage. So when you get this assignment, what do you have to do? What's your purpose? What do they say is your purpose? What do you think?
To persuade.
To persuade. So you have to start thinking in that direction. You have to start thinking about using language that would get somebody to agree with you. And again, this is all in your head. We haven't started using any strategies for writing things on paper yet. We just want to make sure that we're clear and we're thinking in the right direction. So, if you had a persuasive argument, these are some of the things that you would want to be asking yourself. This is the discussion that you would want to have in your head, the dialogue. You would want to ask yourself, what are some arguments for my position? What are some of them against my position? Because remember, you're trying to persuade somebody, so you want to think of all the good things you can say about it, and you want to remember that somebody might bring up one of the bad things, one of the negatives. What are you going to say to them to convince them that the negative is not that bad? Who is for it? Who is against it? Why? You can include things in there like, you know what, you need to be for voting because when we get a certain president in office, things will run smoother. Everybody in the country is going to be affected by it. Is it right or is it wrong? Is it good or bad or both? Again, what are you thinking? That voice in your head is trying to raise these questions. How does it affect others? You might get a paper that is asking you to be descriptive. So if somebody wants you to describe, let's say, a location. Where did you go on vacation? What was the best trip you ever took? And when they use that word descriptive, you want to start thinking about your senses. How does it look? How does it smell, sound, taste, feel? If you leave out some of these senses, it's really not addressing a full description. If it's compare and contrast, what is it similar to? What is it different? You want to think of both things, and then all of a sudden that dialogue is, well, how do I make a connection from these two things, and how do I separate them? Analysis. It's interesting because today I actually had a student who was asked to do an analysis by the guidelines. The purpose was to analyze something that the class read, and she actually did a summary. And it wasn't until I pulled up the guidelines and saw that it was analyze, give your thoughts, be critical, that I realized that the language that she was using was a summary, which is just showing the same information with no input on her own, versus what an analysis is. So I thought that was really timely that I was going to be talking about this today. And once I explained the difference, she was going to go back and put her own information, her own thoughts into it. Because an analysis, how can my topic be broken down? How does it work? What is it made of? Why is it important? What do I think of it? And informative, very straightforward, but you do want to think about who would find my topic useful, because you want to write towards those people. Keep that audience in mind. How is it useful? Why? What value does my topic have? It could be political, social, economic. Those are the things you want to start to research on. Okay, so this is just all the beginning, and I know it seems pretty straightforward, but if you don't get your purpose right, everything you do after that is going to be kind of wasted because it's not addressing what you're supposed to be doing. So it is very important. After we've got the guidelines, we're going to learn some pre-writing strategies. Sometimes what you do before you actually start writing paragraphs can make a huge difference in how easy it is to write your whole paper. Meaning that some pre-writing strategies are so helpful. If you do them, you will have a much easier time finishing your paper. And I'm going to show you what I mean. And then we'll do the strategy, and then we're going to do some practice techniques. So, this is our assignment again. This time, I'm curious to see what you would do on your own before I talk about any of the strategies. How do you normally approach an assignment? So the same thing, write a 2-page essay persuading the Board of Education to make a change that would improve your life as a student at College of DuPage. I want you to take this scratch paper that you have, and I want you to do what you would normally do if you were given this assignment. Somebody just gave this to you. You're sitting down by your desk or in the library or at home. You're opening up your homework, and this is what it says to do. How do you normally get started? There's no right or wrong answers. I'm just curious to see what you would do. So nobody really started just writing sentences, right? Okay, nobody started with just a topic sentence, because some people do. Some people just feel like, I'm just going to write that first introductory paragraph, and then it's just going to flow from there. I've had students tell me, oh, if I could just get the first paragraph, I've got the whole thing. Or if you could just help me with a couple sentences, I know how to write the whole thing. And it usually doesn't work that way, because you're not really lining up your thoughts and preparing what you're going to put on the paper. So, did anyone, I was going to give you that as a help. Sorry, it was some of the reminders of what you would have, because we were persuaded. Were you keeping these in mind as you were doing your writing? Was this in your dialogue in your head? What are some arguments for may change against it? Was anyone using those kinds of questions to get them thinking? So, I'm curious. Did anyone list ideas? Very good. Did anybody use the 5 W's and how? Who, what, where, when? Okay. Did anyone use association? And we're going to go through these. Anybody do an outline? I'm a pretty big fan of an outline, of an informal outline, because sometimes you can did you use that? Very good. You can use an outline. It's very handy for, having your topic sentence for each paragraph and then what details you're going to use. Clustering. We're going to talk about clustering. Or free writing. If you did start writing sentences, that is a strategy. It's called free writing, but you're not stopping yourself. And we're going to actually practice free writing in a little bit. Okay, this is what I came up with if I was going to list my ideas. Some things that could be improved. Maybe expand the parking lot. Lower tuition. Makes the syllabus available online before registration. You know how sometimes you get in a class and then all of a sudden it's not what you thought it was going to be? But what if you got to see the whole packet ahead of time? That would be kind of a nice improvement. Create an online profile of all instructors, including their experience. I wanted to know who was going to be teaching my class. Offer more flexible learning classes. So these are just some of the list of ideas. There's other ways to kind of start to get things on paper. This just shows if you are going to use a list, this T-graph is very helpful. Because you're trying to persuade, like I said, you want to have the reasons why you think it should be a change that's made. But you also want to consider what people are going to say against it to kind of try and get them to not believe that. You want to address that counter-argument. So this is just showing you how you can have a list, but there's different ways you can list it if it's helpful. This is the 5 W's and how. Who would benefit from this change? If you were going to answer this question, it would be the students, right? So you can ask yourself, or myself, or me and other students like me. What would it take to make this happen? How do you think you make a change at the college or at any school? If you don't know, it really has to go through the Board of Education or the school board. So You have to present it to the people who have the authority. So you want to consider that you have to convince them as well as convincing other students. Where could support come from? Let's say I was writing a paper about expanding the parking lot. And I want to persuade somebody, so I want to make it seem like it's an easy thing to happen, or that it's, it's possible. The first thing somebody's going to say about expanding the parking lot is, well, where are we going to get the money? You can't just bulldoze and start making a new parking lot. So what in your paper is going to address this idea of where we get the support? That's when you have to really stop and think, how am I going to answer this question? Well, maybe we charge for parking in a specific area. Maybe they build a new structure, and if you want to use that new structure, maybe they go up in a parking, the underground parking. And if you want to use that, you have to pay when you come in. You open the gate, you give them however much money. Maybe you ask the school to have a fundraiser. Maybe you ask the school board to cut costs from something else. Look to the budget and see. When would this change happen? Because again, you're trying to be persuasive. What's the timeline? Well, probably once it would get approved. And you got the bids for it. Why would this change be a benefit? Now you're starting to think about what would happen if there was more parking. Why would more parking be so much better? You don't have to rush to class, right? You don't have to maybe come to school early because you've got to drive around all the time. If you knew you could come to COD and find a parking spot within a matter of a couple of minutes, maybe you'd be less aggravated on your drive. Maybe it's just the way it should be in order for you to be happy, like you're going to a place, you go to the grocery store, there's parking. If you go to school, there should be parking. This is where it starts to get into how you're going to be persuasive. How can it realistically happen? That's the punch for being persuasive. That's up to you. But if you answer these questions, it gives you a way to get those thoughts on paper. Okay. You can also use association. You can associate making a change with how it will affect you. That change is going to have something to do with you. How do you associate the change with having a better life or time at COD? What at COD do people think negatively about? Could be the parking, it could be the classes offered. What else is negatively associated with COD? What did this issue develop from? Well, if it was the parking lot, you'd start to think, well, it just got to be too crowded. At College of DuPage, there's just more and more students. They built it before. That also gives you a reason to make the change, because as more students came, you need to address other things. What did it develop from? What does or can my improvement lead to? Happier students, an easier day, some of the other things that you talked about, a better choice of classes. So if you're using association to write your persuasive paper, you can answer these questions and have that be written down and then work from there. Okay. I said I liked an outline, so I decided to fix the parking. What's nice about an outline is if you can get a solid outline done, you've pretty much done most of your paper. And that's why this getting started is the whole idea of getting started using strategies is such a good idea, is because it's actually helping you make it easier to get your assignment done. If I use not enough spaces for the number of students as a topic sentence, I can just go into filling in that paragraph with ideas about there's no spots available, and I'm often late because I'm searching for it. How can it be fixed? How can there be more spaces available? How to cover the cost? By filling in the outline, I'm filling in the ideas for each paragraph and moving towards persuading everyone. Any questions about the outline? It doesn't have to be formal. sometimes you can write a sentence and then underneath it just kind of put down a few ideas of how you will support that sentence. And it stops you from trying to go someplace else. You know, sometimes there comes a time when you have to start writing because you have to turn the paper in. And it stops you from saying, well, what about this idea? What about that idea? You've got it all laid out. Yeah, it works very well. Clustering is this kind of thing. And I have to say, I'm a pretty big fan of clustering. It's more informal, where you're just putting what you're supposed to be writing about in the center, and you're just seeing what branches out from that. And what happens is, you know, the center circle becomes the main topic, and then the bigger circles become probably what your paragraphs are going to be about, and then the smaller circles break out into the details that would support your paragraph. Okay, so this is just what I came up with and then kind of separated it out. I am going to have you choose from one of the 4 medium-sized bubbles, and I will put it back up on the screen, and I'm going to explain free writing. Free writing means that you just write continually without stopping and just see what comes out of your head. And it could even be where you're just writing things like, I don't know what to write, I'm not sure what to do. But this is a nice strategy when you're really stuck. You know how sometimes you think of one thing and it leads to a second thought? That's what you're trying to get with free writing. So I want you to take a look at, this is what you're considering as something that can be improved. The cost. Can the cost be addressed? How can the cost be changed to make your life as the COD student better? If the teachers are all different, you know, because I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's certain things that need to be done in each class, but beyond that, a teacher has a lot of free reign to teach the class how they want to. I remember years ago there was somebody that taught one of the English classes for writing, and they said the instructor really liked Ben Franklin. So every paper they wrote the whole semester was about Ben Franklin. Wouldn't you kind of want to know that before, if you really weren't a big Ben Franklin fan, you know, you might want to know a little bit more about your teachers. Maybe that's one of the drawbacks. You know, you look through that catalog and there's a million classes with all different instructors. Maybe that's one of the drawbacks of COD, that you really don't know which one to choose. You don't have anything to base it on. Classes, is there something wrong with the way the classes are offered that you would present? And the parking lot. So free writing about the parking lot. Something, and remember, the purpose is to persuade a change to be made that would make your life better at COD. So go ahead and try the free writing. See how it feels. You can use your scratch paper. But remember, you're just writing. You're continually writing. You're using no filter. Okay. So we're thinking about what we just talked about, understanding the assignment guidelines. You want to make sure that you're following what you're supposed to follow. And then, you know, use the pre-writing strategies that work for you. There's no right or wrong answer to this, but we just want you to be aware of some of the choices. Practice techniques. Now, I want you to try by writing an informative essay about your hometown. And you can use any of the getting started strategy choices. You can list if you want. You can ask questions. You can use association. You can cluster. You can put your hometown in the center and use the bubbles. You can free write or you can outline. But I want you to inform, not describe, not persuade somebody that they should live there, but I want you to inform in your essay. I want it to be about your hometown. Any questions? Could you see how the guidelines make a difference? Once I tag it as an informative essay, that means you can't use the language that would make somebody want to live there. Like, this is the greatest place in the world to raise a family. I want you to tell me what are the things that make it. Inform me about what there is in the town that would make it a great place. You can use some description, but it's not your main focus. You're not going to be going after how does it sound, how does it smell, how do you feel when you're in there. This is a little bit more that anybody could find this information, and it's not biased because of how you feel or you think. These are the strategies, but remember what the goal is. The goal is to get your ideas down on paper. If you feel that you want to blend some of these, it's not like, it's against the law to do your own unique way or your unique strategy. Maybe you are going to list things, but maybe you're going to add a little bit of a cluster after you've listed a few things. This is a strategy that works best for each person for their particular assignment. So don't feel restricted by any rules when it's something that's meant to help you. So don't be afraid if you blend a little bit or kind of make some of these your own. The ultimate goal is to get what you're thinking down on paper. I'm going to put the amenities of Glen Ellen. Through its many amenities, Glen Ellen offers many options to new families. So they used an outline, and they decided, well, what was it that they wanted to talk about specifically in Glen Ellen? Well, what does it have to offer to new families? Schools, parks, and restaurants. So you can see if you were writing this paper, it would be easy to organize your paper into the different areas and then fill in the blanks with that. Any questions? Do you feel like you're going to go forward and use some of these strategies? They really do work. They really do. It's just making your, good writing is about getting your thoughts and thinking and letting it show on the paper. So they're just nice strategies.